As we dive into the section of the course on international trade, let's provide a bit of context on how trade works in the U.S. economy. We'll use the latest data on international trade, which you can find at data.worldbank.org. In 2015, the United States exported $1.5 trillion worth of goods. This table shows the value of our exports by category. Our biggest export was machines, engines, and pumps. We exported about $200 billion worth of this category. Electronics were second at $170 billion. Airplanes and spacecraft are third at $131 billion. At the same time, the U.S. had imports of $2.3 trillion worth of goods. This table shows the value of our inputs by category. The biggest category is electronics at $333 billion. Think about Samsung smartphones, for example. Third is vehicles at $283 billion. Furniture, lighting, and signs are in seventh at $61 billion. As a result of these figures, we have a trade deficit of about $800 billion. The U.S. trade deficit has varied over time, but we are generally in deficit. This didn't used to be true. In the 1950s, we ran a trade surplus, which means we exported more than we imported. But since the 1970s, we've had a trade deficit. Here's a table with our top trading partners. Canada's number one. We trade $660 billion worth of products with them. China is second at $590 billion. Mexico is third. Notice that two of the top three countries are our neighbors. Part of the reason we trade so much with them is that they're so close to us. But another reason is that we have free trade agreements with them, which we'll discuss more in another application. We can also see which countries we have the biggest deficit with. We know we import $800 billion more than we export. Where do these extra imports come from? The biggest reason for this deficit is our trade with China. We export $123 billion worth of stuff to China and import $466 billion, leading to a $343 billion trade deficit with China alone. Germany is in second place, way behind at $74 billion. A trade deficit sounds bad, right? And anytime there's a presidential election, politicians like to tout our trade deficit as a sign of weakness. Is such a deficit sustainable? How can we always import more stuff than we export? The reason for our deficit is the other side of the Pikachu example. We send more money to other countries than they send to us. So basically, the U.S. sends more money to other countries than they send to us, and these countries send us more goods than we send to them. These facts raise some interesting questions. First, why do we export stuff like aircraft and import stuff like furniture? Second, why do we have trade deficits even when other rich countries like Germany don't? That is exactly what we'll describe in the next lecture.